Welcome to the Graybeard Chronicles podcast. Your hosts, Brian Halstead and Kevin Harkins, are two gray-bearded patriots who love God, their family and friends, and their country. The Graybeards are here to inspire, inform, and educate you on a myriad of topics they are passionate about. Brian and Kevin have a strong desire to share this with you to help you live your best life. Sit back and enjoy this amazing podcast as the Graybeards pass along the wisdom of the ages.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Graybeard Chronicles. I'm Brian Halstead.
And I'm Kevin Harkins.
And Kevin, we're here to pass along some wisdom of the ages. What the heck does that mean?
We're not perfect, but we do have gray beards. And that means we've got some significant life experience, some life lessons, and some perspectives that are worthy of passing along.
Well, I think that sums it up nicely. Let's get to it. Kevin, good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm doing excellent, Bryant. Here we are again.
Yes.
Here's
back where we belong.
Here's my conclusion from the week.
All right.
The older I get, the less I know. You know what I mean?
Is that because you're forgetting stuff, or
No. It's just because what I'm finding is there's so much more out there in the world as you read and as you talk to people and as you get exposed to things, you just realize, oh my goodness, there's so much out there that I have no idea what's going on in a lot of ways. So
I would definitely agree with that. So there's some stuff we're going to talk about tonight we might not know anything about.
Well, that's what reminded me of it.
Yeah.
Is that just the brief conversation that we had before we started recording made me realize, boy, there's a whole bunch of stuff that I don't know.
I hear you. So we have I'm just going to dive right into this, right? So I'm anxious to get going here. We have the privilege of having a special guest with us tonight, Supervisory Special Agent Aaron Snyder with the FBI, who, in addition to many things that I'm going to talk about here in a second, is a personal friend of mine that I've known for a number of years and have a great deal of respect for. So thank you for being here. And let me talk a little bit about what I know of his background. So he's a graduate of the University of Kansas, former commissioned officer in the Army, spent 5 years in the Army as an infantry officer. And then after that, decided to go into law enforcement and worked for a local department in police department, Riley County, Kansas, and just continuing to evolve and grow, transitioned and became an FBI agent a couple years later, and then has been full speed ahead in the FBI, served as a member of FBI SWAT team in California, was directly assigned as a support role to the hostage rescue team, been involved in all kinds of criminal investigations, both domestically, internationally, and just, a very, very knowledgeable guy with a lot of experience. And there's some cool stuff that he's done in training that we really want to dive into tonight, and which is the reason that he's here. And thank you again, Aaron, and certainly expand on anything that I hadn't talked about that you want to call out as far as your bio goes.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Brian. As Brian alluded to, I've been in the Bureau for a while now, and had the good fortune to get trained and be an instructor in a lot of different areas that are of interest to me, particularly a firearms instructor, a tactics instructor, a defensive tactics instructor, and through that training and those opportunities, it also afforded me to be able to become an instructor in the particular topic that we're going to talk about tonight.
All right. And what is that topic?
What is that? Out of that pregnant pause. What are we talking about tonight?
All right. I'll let that cat out of the bag. So it's no secret that there's a lot of information on the news about mass shootings and active shooter situations that have occurred in our country. Unfortunately, it's become a little too politicized, and you see it in mainstream media and so on. And we want to stay away from that kind of subject matter tonight. But we want to talk about, what people, both law enforcement folks that are dealing with this in a professional capacity, and what you and I and any other average citizen can do should they find themselves, number one, hearing some things that are disturbing that might cause them to think somebody might be having an issue and could be capable of engaging in some behavior like this, or find themselves in the middle of an active shooter situation and how to respond. And so really that's the subject matter tonight is to talk about that, right? So there's an incident that occurred, as we all know, in Uvalde not too long ago, and tragic situation. And it's no doubt people want to know how they can best handle things like that. So I'm sure that you're going to share plenty of things with us that'll give people food for thought. So let's dive into it.
You bet. So it's you mentioned people looking for action to take when they're not sure what just occurred. It's interesting because we have a natural tendency to kind of go through a thought process when something out of the ordinary, something unexpected happens. And there's video where you can see people running through this chain of actions. First they freeze, and then they start listening. Am I hearing what I think I'm hearing? They're trying to analyze the sound. Is that really gunfire? And they'll deny it. That's not gunfire. That's fireworks. That's something else. They'll try to find a normalcy bias where they try to make it a sound that they're used to or a sound that belongs in the area. Then they'll start looking around for social proof. Is anybody else freaking out? Is anybody else running? How is everybody else responding? I don't want to be the weirdo that starts running if nobody else is. And then they'll finally realize that nope, this is happening. This is actually happening. And then they'll start to develop their plan for how they're going to actually respond to it. So recognizing that and kind of some steps that we can do to be prepared ahead of time, should we find ourselves in that kind of situation, will help expedite going through that process. And then once we get into plan development, we can expedite that process as well, because we can already have some idea of what an appropriate plan looks like. And that's some of the things that I'd like to discuss with you guys here this evening.
That's interesting stuff, because while you're talking through that and how people might respond in the process that they go through, to talk themselves out of it and so on, it's interesting because those are the same types of things that people do when they're faced with any kind of difficult situation in their everyday personal life. I'm about to engage in something that's going to push me outside my comfort zone. Do I really want to do that? It's like the same process. It's just we're dealing with a much more volatile situation.
Absolutely. Hey, Aaron, I wanted to say also, first of all, thank you for your service, both as an Army officer and as well as the work that you do now with the FBI. I've had the good fortune for over a decade to do contract work with the Bureau, and have enjoyed it thoroughly, and hold you and your colleagues in the highest regard. And so thank you for that. I just, one quick question that pops to my mind based on what you just said. We have in our company that we teach a model called First 15, and the First 15 concept is intended to communicate to people that when something like you're talking about is going on, your first response needs to be within about 15 seconds. Like, what are you going to do immediately to start? And then it's the next, what's the first 15 minutes? It's probably has some common threads that you're way better at because you've lived it. And can you talk about that a little bit? Is that right? Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I think applying a specific timeline sometimes makes for a great model. But honestly, like, right. Gavin DeBecker has a great book out called Just 6 Seconds, where he says that first 6 seconds is crucial, right?
Okay.
Your model is 15 seconds. The bottom line is we need to make a decision quickly. And we can't waste a lot of time being stagnated and being paralyzed by indecision and fear. And I think really that's the important message, right? Is don't let your fear paralyze you and prevent you from making a decision. Don't let the unknown or the worry that the decision may be wrong turn into a decision to do nothing. Right. And I think that's really what the message is, regardless of what kind of a time frame you put to it. The bottom line is the immediacy of the situation and the requirement for some sort of a response.
And how do you well, I mean, I'm just diving right into it. How do you train them to overcome that fear? Because you're right. I mean, people freeze up. I mean, you see it all the time.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think What I'd like to share with you guys and encourage you to your listeners and your viewers to kind of look into is a program that we teach with the FBI. We call it ASAP, the Active Shooter Attack Prevention and Preparedness Program. It's a course that we put on for both our professional staff employees within the FBI, those who do not carry a gun and a badge as part of their course of duties, and we offer to community organizations out in the community as well, besides just the FBI. And it's intended specifically for those folks that may find themselves in an active shooter situation where that activity is occurring and they are not bound by authority, bound by law, or necessarily in a place from a perspective of the equipment they have on them to be a direct involvement in trying to end that hostility. So what action should they take, right? What is appropriate? And as we walk through that, we kind of start with trying to help them understand what the threat is. Because a lot of times, if we can kind of identify what the threat is, it helps us be able to wrap our minds around how to deal with it, right? And so, for instance, one of the things from a understanding perspective that I think is key to understand is sometimes when we think about people that have chosen to become a mass shooter, chosen to partake in an active shooting type of incident as the hostile action, we tend to categorize them as monsters, right? And certainly what they have done is monstrous. Certainly they have chosen to take some very heinous action, and that's undeniable. But when we mentally categorize them as monsters, we kind of form our own image of what that means. And typically we envision someone who is and has always been a total sociopath, someone who is just an evil person, has no friends, is completely alone. And we think to ourselves that that's the background of someone who chooses to take this kind of action. And the problem with kind of developing that mindset is we start to eliminate people that we know because we think they're struggling in life, they're having problems, but they're not a monster. And so we may miss signs that we might otherwise be open to that would allow us to potentially have a conversation with someone, help them find some help with trauma or stress that they're dealing with that might prevent them from going down an irreversible path. But a lot of times if we take that categorization of a monster and we think these people are just evil incarnate, then we eliminate those that we know as potentially the next active shooter, and we close our minds to the possibility that someone we know would fall into that category. So I think it's important to understand that these are people that have experienced trauma. It may be ongoing trauma from something in their lives. It may be a specific moment where something traumatic has happened that's more than they know how to deal with, and it's turned them into someone who will take monstrous action. But it doesn't necessarily mean they've always been a monster. These are people that had friends. These are people that had social circles. These are people that were active on social media before they chose to take this action. So we just got to be careful not to just dismiss everyone by categorizing them that way.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think many of the things that we talk about and ask people to be aware of when it comes to preventing suicide, those same types of behaviors could
Absolutely.
be indicative of somebody that may go down this path. I mean, we've said, at least I've said and heard it said in my law enforcement background a number of times, suicidal people are homicidal people.
Yes.
So, you got to, there's clues there as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Certainly people that choose to become an active shooter, they are suicidal. Very, very rarely are they going to have an exit plan. They don't intend to get out of this alive. They either intend to take their own lives at the end of their actions, or they intend to be killed. And so they are suicidal in that sense, right? And you're absolutely right in recognizing that. Often these people have become what we call grievance collectors, and they're people that have, like I said, had some sort of trauma, some sort of stressor, and now they feel like the world's against them. And as you gentlemen know, and you've talked about on your show before, you find what you're looking for. So if you become a grievance collector and you're looking for reasons to be mad, you're looking for ways that people have wronged you, you will continue to find them, and it will validate those feelings. And these are people that often have turned to that way of thinking, and now they feel like the deck is stacked against them, the whole world's against them, they have no recourse. And so, I'm going to do something that's going to garner attention. I'm going to do something extreme, and this is a path that they chose. But to your point about being suicidal, one of the things I encourage everybody is to, if you can, take some training on how to deal with a suicidal person, on how to have that hard conversation. I know through the FBI, I've had the opportunity to take some of that training, because if you know how to talk to somebody and open that conversation, if somebody is having those difficulties, and you are in a position where you can spot the changes in their behavior and realize that maybe they're not on a good, healthy mental path, there are some things that you can do to open that conversation and to be kind of that first responder for them, to really get them thinking about their actions, and then to help them seek the professional help that they really need long-term to help deal with that.
Yeah, that's great info.
Yeah, it has my mind racing about, I asked a question and Aaron goes all the way back to, well, before we get there, let's go back to the very beginning and say, let's try to prevent this thing from happening in the first place by noticing what's going on around us and the people that we work with. Because, it's not very it's not very often that an active shooter, I shouldn't say that. Are active shooters typically somebody going into a place that they've never been before?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
And that's the part of that is understanding the threat, right? As I mentioned at the beginning, is no, you're right. Typically, the person who has chosen to go become an active shooter and create a mass shooting they're going to go to a place that they have some sort of an affiliation with. Often it is a place that's associated with what they deem their grievances to be. So school shootings tend to be someone who either attends or had attended that school. Workplace shootings tend to be either someone who worked there, does work there, or someone that they have a grievance with, maybe an ex, it's their place of employment, right? So there usually is some sort of an association. It's not very often that they randomly choose a place. There are examples where someone had a primary target intended, and for whatever reason, they were sidetracked from that. There was an armed guard, there was the door was locked, there was traffic, whatever reason, they weren't able to execute the primary place they intended to, and then they just chose somewhere else that looked like a good target. So that does happen, but typically there is some sort of an association there.
Got it.
And you're right. So I mentioned, the program we have is called the Active Shooter Attack Prevention and Preparedness. And, along those prevention lines, some other tips that I'd love to share with your listeners and your viewers. There's kind of two levels that I think we can take action to help prevent some of these things. And on an individual effort, the first thing is simply to be kind. Be kind to the people around you. Engage the people around you. There's a lot of businesses out there that will put a greeter at the front door. And part of the reason for that greeter is to simply be someone who everyone who comes into that business gets the message of, I see you, right? And if we kind of take that mentality out on the street and we say every human being we encounter deserves the basic respect and kindness of a message that says, I see you and I respect the humanity in you, and just acknowledge the people around us. Don't walk blindly through life. Just that basic engagement and interaction with people can be enough to brighten somebody's day, especially, if they sense that sincerity in your words, right? So just being a kind person and engaging those around you in chit chat and conversation can go a long way towards helping pull somebody out of a funk that maybe is in a mentally bad place, where they feel like they're walking through the world as a shadow, and just you saying hello and talking to them for a couple minutes can change that mentality. So I think that's really at the end of the day, if we don't do anything else, just be kind, and that will go a long way towards helping folks be seen and helping people feel like they're part of a bigger community. They're part of the plan, whatever you believe is responsible for that plan, but that we have going on Earth here. And the other thing that I would recommend just that we can all do for those of us that choose to own firearms is to make sure that we store those weapons safely and appropriately. Don't let your firearm become the next firearm involved in some sort of a crime. So make sure that you're storing those weapons in an appropriate manner with safes and locks as they should be stored. And then my final piece that I'd like to give from an individual perspective of things we can do to help prevent an active shooter situation is, quite frankly, we got to think about the things that attract us and the things that we tend to tune into when it comes to the news and to media, because it's a free world out there, and they're going to present us with the news that gains viewership. And the more viewers they have, the more advertisement dollars they have. So, that's what they're going to put out there, is what we consume. And as long as we consume the gore, as long as we consume the violence, as long as we consume the explosive stories, that's what they're going to put on the news every night. I'd offer this as an example. When we were all younger, the big boogeyman in the closet was the serial killer, right? But you don't hear much about serial killers anymore. Why is that? Is it because there are no more serial killers? Everybody just decided to stop being a serial killer? No, this still happens. There's still serial killers out there, but it doesn't garner the level of media attention that it used to. So if somebody's looking to make a name for themselves, becoming a serial killer isn't the way to do it. It's the active shooter that's getting all of the media attention. And so if that's what my motivation is that I want to be known, I want my 15 minutes of fame out of my actions, that's going to draw them because it's what the media is talking about right now. So if we can stop consuming that kind of news, hopefully we can influence the media to not make it such a big story. Obviously, it's important. It needs to be reported. But, one of the things that in the FBI we really strongly recommend is there's some agencies out there, some organizations, for instance, don'tnamedem.org, that really encourages media and folks as they're talking about these events to not name the person responsible for the situation, right? Talk about the victims, talk about the heroes, talk about the efforts of the people that were involved with trying to stop the action, but don't name the guy or gal who actually created the situation in the first place. And if we don't give them that publicity, we don't give them that notoriety, we deny them one of their main reasons for choosing to go down this path.
Yeah.
I want this training.
Amen to that. Where do you stop? And out of all those suggestions that you threw out, pick the number one thing. And I don't know. I mean, in my own mind, I think there is a number one thing. And that's not to say that any of them are any less important. The fact that you opened up with talking about, I think it was first. But anyways, being kind to one another. Yeah. Man, that is so important. There's
it's really powerful, actually.
Especially these people that don't feel like anybody's noticing them or everybody treats them like crap. Just being kind.
Yeah.
Imagine how much better the world would be. I saw a bumper sticker that said something to that effect just yesterday. It said, we can still be kind to each other even if we don't agree on anything else.
Exactly.
And you don't even have to find out that you disagree on other stuff. If you're talking about strangers, just say hello and be kind.
Right.
It actually kind of makes me wonder how many incidents, how many crimes, how many active shooter situations maybe never happened because of something just like that.
Absolutely. There are known examples of, folks, particularly younger folks, that intended to go into a school or a business or whatever their decision is and become a mass shooter. And someone took the time to talk to them and engage with them, and it changed their mind, and they chose not to go down that path. So certainly those examples are out there. And if there's a few that are known, there's probably many more that are unknown, right? So that simple act of just recognizing somebody and providing them that message of I see you can be really powerful. But the flip side of that is sometimes we see activity or actions by someone that is troubling. We feel like they've got additional stressors in their life. What they're displaying is not what used to be normal for them, and it's concerning, it's worrying. And as a society, we need to make it easier to be able to report when we see that kind of activity, and either we're not comfortable addressing them ourselves and asking them about it, or we really feel like it's too close to an explosive point where there needs to be some sort of interaction. The FBI encourages the development of what we call threat assessment teams in local communities, which brings together folks from the medical field, from the psychological field, from the law enforcement field, from the educational field, and forms teams to look at folks that may be higher risk because of their activity or the situation that they're living with, and decide if there's some sort of intervention that needs to be taken to help them ensure that they have solid mental health and don't make irreversible decisions. And there's a lot of initiatives taking place as well to try to provide environments and tools to be able to report safely and anonymously when you feel there's someone that maybe needs that kind of attention from a group of professionals like that. In Colorado, they started an organization called Safe to Tell, safe, the number 2tell.org. And there's a national program that was started by folks that were survivors and victims' relatives from Sandy Hook, called Sandy Hook Promise, and their website, sandyhookpromise.org. Both of these are organizations that are trying to reach people where they are, meaning that there are hotlines, there's email addresses, there's websites, there's apps that you can download. A lot of schools will make this a program within their school where you download the Say Something app from the Sandy Hook Promise. And if you feel that you have a classmate that needs that kind of attention, you can use the app to report that. And it's not meant to be the SWAT teams come in swooping in and arresting them. It's meant to be, let's get some professionals who really know how to deal with mental health, talking to them and seeing if there's some sort of help that they need to bring them into a good mental health place or keep them in a good mental health place because someone has seen some activity that's concerning. And I think having those safe reporting mechanisms in place. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that you can always go to tips.fbi.gov or call 1-800-TELL-FBI. Those are also nationally available resources to be able to report those kind of activity that you feel is troubling and warrants that kind of attention.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing all those, because that's key, to an incident almost. I think you could go back and research any of these mass casualty type events where there was an active shooter that carried it out, and there's always information afterwards about people saying, well, I knew something was up with that person, why didn't you say something, because maybe they didn't know how. Or maybe they didn't realize that this was a thing, right? And this might be the next step for this person. So
I think you're absolutely right. There's especially amongst young folks that choose to become an active shooter, they almost always leak their intention in some way. Whether it's to a friend, to a parent, to through a social media platform, there's almost always a leak that they are planning to do this. But either people have taken that monster mentality and dismissed that possibility by saying, I know them, they're not a monster, right? And so they've dismissed the seriousness of the situation, or they simply don't know how to report it to the right people. They're thinking, well, I don't want to call the police. I'm not trying to get the SWAT team brought in on them, but I don't know who else to call. So there are resources out there that will bring the right types of professionals into the situation to be able to help them out. And having those systems in place, I think, is crucial.
And I'm sure there's plenty of incidents out there, just like you described, where people have said something and things have been, stopped
Absolutely.
before they ever got started. And we never hear about it, right? Those things don't make the news, and that's fine. So I know that there's good stuff like that going on, no doubt.
You're absolutely right. There certainly are. There's certainly the possibility there could have been many more incidents than what there have been, but luckily folks intervened and got folks the help they needed before they took a decision that couldn't be taken back.
And I hope folks will continue to do that. So far, I have I have two takeaways from all of this. One is there's a lot of resources out there to sort of make yourself smart on this whole topic. You've already quoted chapter and verse of where people can find these things, and they need to take the initiative to go do that. So that's thing number one, is get smart on it. And thing number two is maintain situational awareness of what's going on at all times. And we had a great guest who talked about that several months ago about situational awareness and just being aware, paying attention to what's going on around you. And, you know, there's so much that you can notice if you just kind of have the mindset to do that.
Yeah. I like to say it's not paranoid, it's prepared. Right. And I think we all, those of us that are in law enforcement type of occupations or military type occupations, a lot of us will tend to be that person that likes to sit in a restaurant with our back to the wall where we can see the room. Right. And it's that awareness of what's going on around us, you know, and I don't think that it's paranoid to run through the what if games in your head. Right. Because that just helps you be prepared. It cuts into that decision-making time if something does happen, right? Note where the exit doors are when you go into a building you haven't been in before. You know, if you go to the restroom, kind of take a little bit of a wandering path and just note where hallways are, note where potential areas of cover are. It doesn't have to be, you're not drawing a sketch of the place and getting weird about it, but just taking mental note of those things, right? And being aware of those that are around you, taking into consideration who's with me. Do I have, you know, my elderly grandmother in a wheelchair with me? Because that changes what my reaction might be, as opposed to I'm by myself grabbing a quick bite to eat for lunch, right? Those two situations may require different actions from me. So taking those kinds of things into consideration and just being prepared for the what if will help cut into your decision-making time should you find yourself in a bad spot. And like I said, to me, that's not paranoia. That's just being prepared.
It's a good point. And, you know, my mind went down that path. It's just, it's too bad. And you could say this about any period in human history. It's too bad that we even have to worry about this stuff.
It is.
You know, but we do. I mean, it's real. And, you know, you don't want people to be walking around all the time. I'm old enough to remember, and Aaron, you probably weren't. Brian, you might be. You know, when we were kids, when I was going through grade school, we were all worried about the nuclear incident, you know, the atom bomb, the threat from Russia. And we were all, you know, not Russia, the Soviet Union, actually, you know, get under your desk and, you know, which is laughable when you actually think about it. But that's what, you know, those were the drills that we were going through. And as a kid, that has an impact on your psyche. That, wow, there's evil out there in the world. And so it's naive to think that it's not real and you shouldn't have to worry about it. But the truth is it's happening, and to be prepared. And I'm glad you said that. It's not paranoid. That's a key difference. And I really like that you pointed that out.
Yeah, I think the other thing personally that helps people be more relaxed and able to not be paranoid that something like this may happen is having a plan for what their response to that situation is going to be before it ever occurs, right? So if you can take a very simple, basic plan, put that into your back pocket and hang on to that, something that's adaptable to whatever situation you may find yourself in, and you're comfortable that you can execute that plan, then you can have more confidence that should I find myself in this situation, I'm not going to lock up. I'm not going to freak out. I know what my actions are going to be. And so what we teach in the ASAP program is to basically take a plan that has three basic parts to it. And you've probably heard them in some manner before: run, hide, fight. Okay. Right. The key is how you define what those terms mean. Right. Okay. So when the FBI teaches the ASAP program, we teach run to mean leaving the area that the active shooter is committing these crimes, if at all possible. Right. So if it's safe to do so, take an avenue out of the building. You can't be a victim of an active shooting if you're not in a place that an active shooting is occurring. Right. So get out of there. As you exit that area, keep your hands raised, keep them visible, keep them empty. If you run into law enforcement, follow all instructions that they give you. If you don't run into law enforcement, keep going until you find somewhere safe. And we suggest that safe should be defined as somewhere that has a law enforcement presence, has cover, and as both of you are aware, cover means that it's something you can get behind that stops bullets, as opposed to concealment, something that keeps you hidden visibly, right? So you have cover, you have law enforcement presence, and you have access to medical care. At that time, you are safe and you can stop running, right? So that's one option, is to run. If you can, Get out of there. You can't be a victim of an active shooting if you're not in a place where an active shooting is occurring. Option 2, if running is not a possibility, is to hide. But hide does not mean pile everybody into a blind corner and hope they don't come in, the bad guy doesn't come in the room. Hide does not mean get under your desk like the old nuclear fallout drills, right? Hide means harden your area, make it hard to get into the room you're in, make it difficult for the aggressor to see into the room you're in, and then, as part of that hide strategy, prepare to fight. So that if he does breach that door, if he does come into that area, you are going to be prepared to be able to fight back. Because at the end of the day, this is a person, as was mentioned earlier, who is suicidal. They don't intend to get out of this alive. So reasoning and rationing with them, the point to rationalize with them has already passed. That was before they ever pulled the trigger. We had the opportunity to rationalize and talk with them and get into their decision-making process before they went down that path, and that opportunity was missed. So now the place that they are mentally, they are determined to continue to execute their plan until they run out of bullets or somebody stops them. So pleading with them is not going to do any good. You're going to have to actually stop the threat. And if it comes down to getting killed while attempting to neutralize that threat or getting killed while cowering in the corner, go down swinging. Put your plan together for how you're going to fight back. Yeah, right. Yeah. And so that's part of the scenarios that we go through when we teach this class live, is that we have people go through the process. If you're in a group, how do we plan to do this? Well, I want, the first person to grab their gun and drive it to the ground. Guns aren't magic. They don't shoot bullets wherever the bad guy wants them to. They shoot bullets wherever the muzzle's pointed. So drive it to the ground and it can't shoot at us. While he drives that barrel to the ground, you are going to grab his arms and use your weight, lean into him and drive him to the ground, right? And then meanwhile, I'm going to grab this big heavy vase and I'm going to smack him over the head with it as hard as I can, right? Now we have a plan. We got a fight plan on how we're going to fight back against this threat. And I think that if you go in and you recognize that's the level of planning, that's the level of preparedness mentally that you have to have, is that if they get into this space that I have done my best to harden and defend, the fight is on. We're going to go into this and we're going to fight to win. If you are ready to accept that, then now you have the confidence that if I find myself in a bad situation, I have my simple plan: run, hide, fight. I hear gunshots, I am getting out of here. I'm going the other way. I'm not going to be in the area to be a victim. If I can't run, I'm going to harden this area I'm in as much as I can, make it as defensible as I possibly can. And in the meantime, I'm going to prepare myself and everyone with me to get ready to fight. And if he gets that door open, the fight's going to be on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a good way. And thank you. You articulated it so clearly, and anybody can understand that. And just having the sort of mental presence to go through this in advance takes away, not probably completely, but there's so many people that get into these kind of situations and they just lock up. Yeah. They just don't know what to do. They're just so fearful that they just don't know what to do. Yeah. And they freak out. And boy, that's the worst thing, because you're probably drawing attention. The other thing that I want to point out is if you look at a lot of these active shooters that have occurred, especially the school ones. I mean, these are scrawny, 130-pound, stopping wet boys that you could take down easily. I mean, now the thing that's, you're so afraid of is they've got weapons on them that can kill a lot of people. But sure, all it takes is one person to run at them and take them down. And,
yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. They're relying on that weapon, right? They've chosen to commit this crime with a firearm, and they did that because it's a symbol of power, because it is very lethal. It is very easy to use. But firearms aren't magic, right? Both you gentlemen are familiar with how firearms work, and they jam. Jams can be introduced by grabbing a hold of the weapon and fouling the action. You can force a weapon to jam. They have to reload. The most common magazines are going to hold somewhere between 8 and 30 rounds, depending on the type of weapon that it is. And they're going to run out of bullets. They're going to have to reload, which provides an opportunity to be able to get in and take some sort of hands-on action during that reloading process if you're aware of it and waiting for it, right? So firearms aren't infallible, They certainly can be used against the person who's bringing them to the fight by taking them out of the fight. If you can introduce a jam into the weapon, introduce a malfunction, get it pointed at the ground where he can't shoot at anybody because all his shots are going into the ground. Those are ways to take that out of the fight. And now, if you're holding a malfunctioning AR-15 that's all jammed up and not working, and I've got a heavy steel chair, I think I'm in the better spot in this fight at that point. Right. So you just got to find ways to get in there and have the courage, because at this point, again, he's going to kill you. You're not going to be able to reason with him. You're not going to be able to rationalize with him. So you got to get in that mindset of, I'm at least going to go down swinging. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to try to take control of this situation and end this, because the only other option is to just lay down and die. And I do not accept that as an option. So get mentally into that space and then go in there, get a hold of that weapon. Just grabbing a hold of a lot of different firearms, particularly handguns, which is the most common weapon that's used in these situations. If you can just grab a hold of it, they'll get one round off, and then it's not going to feed the next round in. It's going to jam the gun up. And so something as simple as being willing to be that person to run in there and grab a hold of that gun and drive it down. They fire one round and then it's jammed up, and now the dog piles on, and we can take control of the situation and take it back from the person who has tried to come in here and be controlling with that firearm.
Yeah. Whew. Yeah. And people also have to, I love what you said about, when you have a choice to either, just cower and be a victim and let that person take you out and die in that way, or, go out fighting. It's all about having a mental plan. And I think, I'm sure you've heard, I know you've heard this, Kevin, the phrase, you need to train how you're going to fight, because you're going to fight how you train.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to, as a person that's going to be operating in an environment where something like this could occur, and it could occur anywhere, how do you do that kind of training often enough so it becomes instinctual? And my answer to that is you do it in here.
Absolutely. The mental exercises.
Yeah, the visualization. And there's been plenty of research about how effective that is, as effective as if you were actually doing it physically.
Absolutely.
So, don't think, and I'm just kind of speaking to the audience in a broad term here, don't think we're talking about, going out and doing this physical training on a regular basis to respond to this stuff. Like Aaron said, in a restaurant, identifying where the exits are, and, keep your mind, and Kevin mentioned, the power of awareness and being, just attuned to what's going on around you, all of those things, and training your mind to operate like that.
Absolutely.
It's that mental exercise that's just absolutely invaluable.
Yeah. You're 100% right. You don't need to go out and get your buddies together and rehearse and role play this all the time to be ready for it. It is as simple as just having that awareness of your surroundings, and then going through those mental rehearsals in your mind as you're walking down the street, going into a business. If someone walks in here today with ill intention and a firearm, what are my reactions going to be? Where am I going to run to if running's an option? If I can't, how can I harden this area that's around me? How can I better prepare myself and those with me to fight? And if you're just kind of running through those in your mind, a little mental rehearsal, a little checklist of where are my exits? Can I break this window out? Is there a chair I can throw through it if I need to? Am I on the first floor or am I on the sixth floor? Because that's going to change my escape options, right? Just thinking about those things and being aware of them can really go a long way towards being prepared should you find yourself in this situation.
Yeah, make a game out of it, right? So challenge yourself to observe those things in any scenario.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. Meaning make a game out of it. Just make it fun. Even as a family, you can
it's a serious topic, but it doesn't mean that we can't, we don't have to be all stoic and reserved about our preparation for it just because it's a serious topic. We can have fun with it.
Yeah.
You bet. This is good stuff. I'm going to look up some of this stuff and just refresh, even though I've been through some of it. I'm clearly not an expert.
Yeah, we'll make sure that we post all of these links that Aaron so eloquently rattled off in quick fashion. Great info, and we'll make sure that those all get posted in the description so people can look at that and go and find those resources that are out there and available. So what else? What else have we not asked you, or have we not covered off on in this particular subject area that we have to before we're done here, Aaron?
I do have one more point that I wanted to hit on for sure, and so I appreciate you asking that, and that is basic life-saving skills, right? Should you find yourself in this situation, there will be victims. There will be people who have wounds that need to be attended to. And the number one cause of preventable death is uncontrolled bleeding from legs and arms. That's the number one cause of preventable deaths, uncontrolled bleeding from arms and legs. And so understanding, having some training and some ability to do basic life-saving skills, knowing how to apply direct pressure to a wound, what that means, how to pack a wound if you have like a gunshot, knowing how to use and carrying with you a tourniquet is a great skill to have. They're not super expensive. They can be found on the internet for around $25. The FBI happens to use a tourniquet that's called the Combat Application Tourniquet. There are several different styles available out there, but it doesn't do any good to have one if you don't know how to use it, and it doesn't do any good to know how to use it if you don't have one. So I keep one in the saddlebag of my motorcycle. I keep one in each of my vehicles. I don't necessarily carry one around with me every day, but I certainly have them in places that they're accessible if I need one. And having that with you, knowing how to use it, should you find yourself next to someone who's been a gunshot victim, or you yourself have become a gunshot victim in one of those extremities, being able to apply that tourniquet, it could be the difference between them bleeding out or being saved that day. So I definitely would encourage everyone to seek out the opportunity to take some basic life-saving CPR, first aid, learn how to use a tourniquet, learn how to use an AED. All of those are great skills to have. Not only should you find yourself in an active shooter situation, but there are so many other things from a health perspective, a medical perspective, that you may be with someone who starts choking. You may be with someone that has some other medical issue, that training could help you be the difference between them passing away or surviving to fight on another day. So I definitely want to kind of leave my thoughts for your viewers and listeners is seek out that opportunity to take some of that life-saving skills so that you're prepared should you find yourself in a situation where you can apply them and help someone from a medical perspective.
Yeah, thank you for calling that out. And he'd actually made a comment on the heels of our last podcast that this would tie right in. So thank you for calling that out.
I was just going to say that, and we learned just last week you don't have to give mouth to mouth to keep people alive very often, especially adults.
Only CPR. Yeah.
Right. Compression only CPR. So that's a great point. I did want to ask one more question, and it's a quick one, and it's probably a repeat of something that you already said, but when it comes to this whole topic, removing yourself from the details of all of the stuff that you've shared with us, and you just sort of place yourself at a higher level for our listening audience, if there's only sort of one or two thoughts that you would want people to carry away from this conversation, and again, it's okay to be repetitive, but I sometimes repetition is great. What would that be?
I mean, at the end of the day, my two big takeaways that I hope people get out of this is be kind to each other, because that pays more dividends than you will ever know, to just be nice to folks. And then at the end of the day, have a plan. And when things go sideways, do those mental rehearsals and have a plan for how you're going to deal with it, because that's what's going to help you get out of that chaotic situation as quickly and as safely as possible.
I love it. Yeah, that's good stuff, man. Woo!
No doubt. That is outstanding. I'm even going to use that in my wrap up if I can get it all in before the pre-recorded message starts.
Yeah, do it.
All right. We good?
I'm good. No,
right,
I'm totally good.
I'm going to do that thing.
Reach over and touch that button.
Thank you for the opportunity to chat with you, gentlemen. I appreciate it.
Man, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. All those that are listening, just remember, between this podcast and the next, you make sure that you take time to enjoy the ride.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Graybeard Chronicles. Please subscribe so you'll receive notification when new episodes are available. To learn more about the Graybeards, visit their website, graybeardchronicles.com.
Thank you again, Aaron, man. Great information. And those two parting thoughts, right? Be kind and have a plan. Huge value in that.
Yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity.